Hi, I'm Jeremy, and today I'm going to show you a game by the name of Jäger and Späher, which is a German title. I believe it translates to Hunters and Scouts. And this is a game in which both players will be controlling tribes of cavemen trying to gain a foothold and develop goods. It's essentially a race game where players are going to be racing to a set number of points. The game is in the Cosmos 2-player series. It's for ages 12 and up, and it plays in about 60 minutes. I'll take a moment to show you the rules and how the game plays, and then I'll come back and give you my thoughts on it. Okay, so this is the setup for Jäger and Späher, and I've only set up one player's side, but the game would be a 2-player game. Essentially, each player is going to start with a deck of 6 cards, and they'll have the same set of cards as the other player, and these are various tribespeople that the players will be able to play on their turn to execute a number of actions each. They will also start with a cave where they will store the 2 cavemen that they start with, and they'll get 2 of these hunger tiles. This cave also has the instructions for a scoring, which you'll perform during the game. One of these cards, these are wilderness cards, where the players will be able to collect materials, will start flipped up, and these are going to be hunting ground cards. None of those will start flipped up. Also, there's going to be 6 randomly chosen special cave people that you can recruit using your shaman. There will be a deck of item cards. First player will start with 1 item card, the second player will start with 2. These item cards are going to have a requirement to build them, and then also a benefit. So this one would give you 1 victory point and a worker placement. It would require 1 clay, 1 stone. And then there's going to be this other board here, which is the scoring track. The game will end when a player achieves 24 points. If the first player does that, the second player has a chance to overtake them. At the end of that round, the player with the most points will be the winner. Players are going to start with 3 points. Also, they'll start with, this is basically like a reserve cave, and they'll start with 1 worker that they could recruit in that cave, and they'll be able to do that by playing one of their cards. Otherwise, to get additional workers into this interim cave, they're going to need to spend 2 skins, and the player would just sit there until it's recruited to the player's active supply. So it's a 2-step process. There's also the supply of hunger tiles. Again, players start with 2, and there are these consumption tiles, which will be placed on the various lands as they are forested, or deforested, I guess, hunted down. Also, 3 of these special areas, sacred areas, will be randomly chosen, and these will have effects only for the player who controls them with workers that are left on them. So the way the game is going to work is that on your turn, you're going to have 3 options. The first would be to play a card and to take an action, or take the actions that are shown on there. So for example, players each will start with a shaman, and keep in mind I've done an English translation of these cards. The game is printed in German. But the shaman, let's say you play that, you could either draw 2 item cards, or you could take 1 exposed character. So let's say I play that. I'm able to take one of these characters. So I might recruit this fisherman, who will allow me to discard hunger tiles and then draw items. So he would just go into my hand, and after I've played my shaman, he's going to be placed in the first of my rows. So the way that this works is that as you play cards, you're going to create a display that's 3 cards wide and then any number of cards deep, and you're always required to keep your rows, or your columns rather, as even as possible. So something like that would be maybe how your end of round situation would look like, and then you are able to recruit back 5, 6, or 7 cards, but you could only recruit from the bottom. So I couldn't take this Fisher card until I've taken these 2 cards. But more on that in a bit. So I've played my shaman. That'd be the end of my turn. The other player would then take a turn, and when it came back to me, I could place another card. Let's say I placed the scout, the Späher. So I again start a new column with that, and then the card here, it shows that I'm going to place 1 consumption stone on every wilderness. So I could look at this wilderness. I want to collect this clay, but I don't really need the fruit, so I might place the consumption stone on the fruit. Then I would draw one wilderness, so a new wilderness will get added. and then I could place one tribesman on any location. So placing tribesmen will allow you to collect resources, which will allow you to build items or to feed your tribe. So I would be able to place one worker essentially onto either of these cards with that card, and since I'm trying to get gold and stone, I might place here. So I could, or rather clay and stone, I place there to get my clay. The other player would go, and when it would come back to me, I might, for example, play the chief. So what the chief will do is it'll let me draw one item. So I just take a new item. This is just another objective to build. It will give me points, and this means I'll be able, if I build this, I'll have to take on an additional hunger tile. And then I could place 2 tribesmen. So again, I only have 1, so I might put him here. So when it came back to me on my next turn, I could do my second of the 2 options on your turn. So again, you could play a card, or you could recall any number of tribesmen. And the way that works is whenever you recall a tribesman, if available, you will place one of these consumption cubes on the resource that you want to take. So this guy will collect a clay, and this guy will collect a stone, which will allow me to build this item. So this, I guess, mortar and pestle, that will give me 1 point, which I would take on the score track, and then immediately I could do a worker placement. So since I'm trying to collect lumber to build this, theoretically I could just place back on here. So this will just keep going around until I've played my cards. So let's say the gatherer, that would let me place additional workers, and you could recall workers at any time, any number of workers. The hunter, what they allow you to do, first you'll place consumption stones on hunting grounds, but then you'll flip up a hunting ground and be able to place workers onto it, and that'll allow you to collect meat or hides. The offspring, what they allow you to do is recruit a worker into your supply, but when you do that, you generally will have to take a hunger tile as well. And the last card, this is a fisherman card that I recruited that lets me discard hunger tiles, so I might discard those, and then I draw what items and choose one. So let's just say I take that. So this would just get discarded. So now I'd be in a situation where I've played all my cards. So my only options would be to retrieve workers, which I might want to do. If I retrieve both of these workers, for example, they could each harvest a wood, and then they get 2 points, and they'd have to take another hunger tile. Oh, that fisher would have gotten rid of one. So now I have 2 things that I've constructed. Those would just sit in front of me. This one's still unconstructed. So now if I had no workers on here and I had no more cards to play, I'd be forced to do the scoring action. So this is called your sunset action, and you could perform this anytime, but generally you want to do it after you've played all of your cards. The way that is going to unfold is printed on your card. So essentially you're going to take 1 victory point for each tribesman that you have. So I have 3 tribesmen, minus 1 victory point for each hunger tile that you have. So I do have 1 hunger tile. And for each card that you have in your hand, I have 0. So I would get 3 minus 1 minus 0, so 2 points. Let's say I've gotten 3 points. Whenever you hit these marks, which are at 9, 14, and 16, you'll have the option to discard 2 of your completed items. So assuming that you've built 2 items in order to get an extra point. So after I've done that, I'm allowed to keep up to 1 item. So I only have 1 item, but if I had more, I'd have to discard unfinished items. And then you have to take 1 hunger tile for each tribesman that you have. So I now have a tribe of 3, so I acquire 3 hunger tiles. If ever you get 8 or more hunger tiles, you'll immediately discard 3 of them, but you also have to return a worker back to the supply. Generally, that's not too hard to avoid. And then you have the option to take from 5 to 7 of your cards back into your hand. You might want to leave them there because there is a penalty for having cards at the end of your turn. But generally you want cards because those are going to be actions, so I could just take all 7 of these. If I wanted to, again, I would have to take them from bottom to top in each of the columns and leave behind some. But then that would begin a new round. This is how the rounds are going to play out. the one thing that I guess I need to explain here are these cards. So these sacred areas, the way that they work. So normally when you're placing a worker on a space like this to claim goods, up to 3 workers there could be placed there, and they could be of either players. So this would be fine. And then whoever recalled their workers first would get first choice of goods. So if black recalled, they get to place 2 cubes. Let's say they took the hides. When white recalled, they would have to take a meat. And the meat, so the hides are generally used to bring new workers onto this board, so you can recruit them with your birthing card, which is, I believe I showed you right here, the offspring card. And the meat, whenever you collect meat, you'll just be able to discard a hunger token. So that's valuable as well, especially if you don't have a card like the Fisher. But again, generally on these types of cards, more than one player could place up to a total of 3 workers per card. If ever these cards fill up with the consumption cube, you'll take them out. And generally more cards will be coming in because most of the cards that allow you to place also introduce a new card into the display. But these sacred cards, they're going to be the same throughout the course of the game, and only one player could be present on one. So let's say I place a worker here. I would get each of them will have a trigger ability. So for example, this one says trigger at your sunset, which is your scoring. Keep up to 3 items. So that will allow you to increase your hand size for your items. This one here, if you play a hunter card, you get a victory point. So that's just a bonus. And this one, for example, if you create an object, so that's just inventing an item, you discard 1 hunger tile. So any of those bonuses will trigger as long as you're present and you have at least 1 worker on those cards. But if another player came and placed more workers than you had there, your worker would get displaced, and then they would have control of the card. So I could come back and replace them with 3 theoretically, but that's unlikely given the paucity of workers that you get over the course of the game. So in general, that's how the game works. It's going to keep going until a player reaches the 24 marker. Again, that will trigger the end of the round. Players will take an equal number of turns, and whoever has the most points will win. One thing to note, as you can see on the scorecard here, is that you're not allowed to cross from 23 to 24 if you have greater than 3 hunger tiles. So you have to keep your tribe fed in order to be in a position to win the game. And that is how you play Jäger and Späher. Alright, so that is Jäger and Späher. And this is, a game that came to me with pretty high expectations, even though it was not published in English, since it is part of this Cosmos 2-player series. That game has had some real classics such as Kahuna and Lost Cities and Blue Moon, and several others that are just absolutely some of the best 2-player games. Targi would be another recent one that I think is similar to this one in terms of complexity. It's for such a small box game, this, like Targi, packs a lot of game into the box. This game is also designed by a designer who I like. He designed Kashgar. Gerhard Hecht is his name. Kashgar is one of my favorite Euro games of the last few years. So again, I was really excited about this, and I think the theme of competing tribes of cavemen is fun. It's similar to the game Stone Age, or I would say, but this is definitely a little bit more complex game than that. I would say that overall, though, I was a little bit disappointed with this game. I've only played it twice, so bear that in mind. And both times I've played the normal game. There's an introductory game, and then there's like an advanced game. But the normal game seems to be like where the real game is, so to speak. And in my plays of it, I find that it feels a little bit scripted, since each player starts out with the same number of cards and the same card abilities, and since you're only going to be running through those cards maybe 4 or 5 times during the course of the games before somebody hits the 24-point threshold, there's not a lot of differentiation in the strategies that the players are going to take. Although you can recruit special power cards, you're only going to be able to play those once every time you go through your hand, and the way this game scores during those intermediate scorings really encourages you to play as many of those cards as possible each time you're going through your hand. As such, if I recruit a card, at most I'm going to be playing it maybe 4 times during the course of the game. So because of that, because of the players having the same abilities as one another, it really becomes a question of timing, I suppose, but also a question of luck. If you get items that require resources that are available on the hunting ground cards that are out, you're going to have a much better chance of completing those items than somebody who, you know, can't get the item that they need anywhere on any of the cards. And that's a little bit disappointing in a game that looks outwardly like a complex thing. The other thing, I guess, that you could do in this game, which is just not my play style, is that you could really play cards to, you know, deny players their resource collection. A lot of the cards, as part of their action, will require you to put these consumption cubes onto hunting grounds. If you see a player has 3 hunters on a card that only has 3 open spaces, if you put one of these cubes down, all of a sudden those 3 characters can only collect 2 goods. And, you know, that's a little bit, you know, mean-spirited, but I do realize that that's probably the way to play this game. So because of that, and because of what seems to be the high amount of luck in a game that is otherwise rather strategic, you really have to plan out your moves so you know, aren't caught at the end of a scoring with a lot of hunger and a lot of cards in your hand. That's somewhat disappointing to me, so it's just not my type of game, to be perfectly honest. I think that other people might like it. People who don't mind a more confrontational 2-player game would probably enjoy it, but for me it's something of a miss, at least based on my early plays. So I don't think I mentioned that this game is only available in Germany. On Board Game Geek there are card translations and rules translations, so you might need those if you don't speak German. Otherwise, those are my thoughts, I would say, on Jäger and Späher, or Hunter and Scout, and thanks for watching.